A Hollywood home has become the scene of a double homicide investigation, and police say the suspect is the victim's own son. New information has been released in the case involving the deaths of Rob and Michelle Reiner. Authorities say the couple were found dead inside their home on Sunday. Their 32-year-old son, Nick Reiner, is now in custody and facing 2 counts of first-degree murder. Prosecutors have also alleged special circumstances because there is more than one victim. Investigators have released few details publicly. Much of what has circulated has come through media reporting, and not all of it has been confirmed by police. What is now official, though, is stark. The Los Angeles County Medical Examiner has ruled both deaths homicides, and the cause of death has been described in terms that point to close-range violence. The case has been followed closely through coverage from Law and Crime's On the Case, hosted by Chris Stewart, and by reporting from outlets such as The Hollywood Reporter, KTLA, NBC Los Angeles, People, and TMZ. First, the legal reality. Nick Reiner is currently being held in the Los Angeles County Jail. He made his first court appearance on Wednesday. Courtroom cameras were not allowed to take pictures of him. Instead, the public saw courtroom sketches. In those sketches, he appears wearing a blue protective vest, the kind often used for defendants to prevent self-harm. Nick Reiner is represented by defense attorney Alan Jackson, a prominent criminal lawyer. Jackson previously defended Karen Reed in trials where she faced charges related to the death of her Boston police officer boyfriend, John O'Keefe, and he secured a not guilty verdict in that case. On Wednesday, Jackson told the judge it was too soon to enter a plea of guilty or not guilty. He asked that the official arraignment be continued. The judge granted that request, and the arraignment is now scheduled for January 7, 2026. The hearing was brief. The only time Nick Reiner spoke was when the judge asked whether he would waive his right to a speedy arraignment so the case could be continued to that date. The judge framed it as a constitutional and statutory right. Nick Reiner responded, "Yes, Your Honor." Prosecutors have charged first-degree murder, which typically reflects an allegation of premeditation. At a news conference earlier this week announcing the charges, the Los Angeles District Attorney mentioned the death penalty. But California has had a moratorium on executions since 2019, and no one has been executed in the state since 2006. With the court date set, one practical question has also been raised. What does a defense like this cost? Alan Jackson is among the most recognizable names in criminal defense, and it is unclear what Nick Reiner did for work. Reporting suggests he lived in his parents' guest house. Jackson has discussed pricing before. In an interview with Vanity Fair around the time of the Karen Reed case, he said he gave her a discount, and he claimed the full cost of her defense through 2 trials would have been roughly $10 million. Whether any similar financial arrangement applies here is unknown. Now, the most disturbing confirmations come from the medical examiner. The medical examiner says Rob and Michelle Reiner suffered multiple sharp force injuries. The word multiple is central. Police have said the alleged murder weapon was a knife, but they have not confirmed whether investigators have recovered it or whether it came from inside the home or was brought there. That distinction matters because early reporting was graphic. Some outlets described throats being cut. The medical examiner's public release does not use that language. Instead, it confirms sharp force trauma, multiple injuries, without detailing the exact wound patterns. There is also reporting about where the couple were found. According to KTLA, the Reiners were discovered in their bed and had been stabbed multiple times. That detail has become a major point of attention because it places the violence in the most private room of the home. It also connects directly to the prosecution's charging decision, first-degree murder, suggesting the state believes the killings were planned. Police and prosecutors have not publicly stated an official time of death, but the public timeline begins with one high-profile event, a holiday party the night before. The last widely reported public event in the sequence is a holiday party at the home of Conan O'Brien on Saturday night. The Hollywood Reporter published an account describing what allegedly happened there. According to that reporting, Nick Reiner was not on the original invite list. His parents were invited and asked if he could come along, and Conan O'Brien reportedly said yes. The same report says Nick was acting erratically, wandering, interrupting conversations, and demanding to know which guests were famous. Some attendees who did not know who he was reportedly wondered whether he had wandered in from outside. One moment described in that reporting involved actor and comedian Bill Hader. Nick allegedly asked Hader whether he was famous. According to someone with knowledge of the situation, Hader calmly responded that he was in a private conversation. The report says Nick then stared at him for what was described as an uncomfortable amount of time. The same reporting describes a loud public argument at the party between Nick and his father, Rob, allegedly sparked by Rob confronting Nick about his behavior. Police and prosecutors have not publicly stated an official time of death, but the killings are believed to have occurred after that party. From there, the public timeline becomes a series of reported movements, with a gap investigators have not filled in publicly. Multiple outlets have reported that Nick Reiner checked into a hotel in Santa Monica around 4 a.m. Sunday, roughly 4 to 4.5 miles from his parents' home in Brentwood. He reportedly used a credit card to check in. Hotel staff who entered the room the next day reportedly found blood throughout the room. Bed sheets were reportedly used to cover the windows. Later discussion of the case also referenced reports of blood leading into the bathroom and blood in the shower, raising the possibility of an attempted cleanup. By Sunday afternoon, concern centered on the Reiners' home. A massage therapist reportedly could not reach Rob and Michelle Reiner. According to People, the couple's daughter, Romy, lives across the street. She reportedly went into the house and discovered what had happened. Reporting indicates Romy initially saw only her father, Rob, and did not realize her mother, Michelle, was also dead. First responders later told her. When the bodies were discovered, Nick Reiner was not at the home. According to TMZ, Romy suggested her brother might be dangerous and that he could be connected to what happened. Later that day, surveillance video placed Nick Reiner elsewhere in Los Angeles. NBC Los Angeles obtained video of him at a gas station near the University of Southern California, in the area around Exposition Park, roughly 15 miles from the Brentwood home. The video is reported to be from Sunday evening. He is seen wearing a jacket and a hat, carrying a red backpack, buying a Gatorade, and then walking across the street. Moments later, police lights and sirens appear in the frame. Officers pull up and take him into custody. Nick Reiner was arrested by the LAPD around 9:30 p.m. Pacific Time Sunday night. Those are the outward facts now in public view. A party, a reported argument, a reported hotel check-in, the discovery in the home, a surveillance video, and an arrest. Behind that sequence is a longer personal history that Nick Reiner has spoken about openly, and it is likely to matter as this case moves forward. Nick Reiner has described struggling with addiction since he was a teenager. He said he first went to rehab at 15 and returned more than a dozen times. He has also said he was homeless at points during his addiction, in Maine, New Jersey, and Texas. Reporting also indicates his parents had grown increasingly concerned about his state of mind recently. Nick wrote a film titled Being Charlie, directed by his father, Rob Reiner, and released between 2015 and 2016. The film follows a young man dealing with heroin addiction and homelessness, and was described as loosely based on Nick's life. The film has a 6.2 rating on IMDb, and there is no clear sign he continued with significant film work afterward. An interview clip from years ago has resurfaced and is now being watched in a different context. In an AOL Build series appearance tied to the film, Rob and Nick talked about what working together meant. Rob described a parent's role in direct terms. If a child is going through rough times, a parent's main job is to keep that child safe. Nick said the bonding came not from the story itself, but from the fact they were working on a movie together. Nick Reiner also appeared on multiple episodes of a podcast called Dopey, focused on addiction. In an episode from roughly 7 years ago, he described the end of a sober period. He said he wanted to come back home, and he admitted he wanted to return to his old life, smoking weed, taking some pills, and doing whatever he wanted. He said he knew he wanted to relapse, even if he did not want to call it that. On another episode, Nick talked about a conflict in 2018. He said his parents kicked him out of their guest house, that he went into a rage, and that he trashed the place. As the family and the public reacted, Nick's siblings released a statement reported by CBS News. They described unimaginable pain, called the loss of Rob and Michelle Reiner horrific and devastating, and said their parents were their best friends. They thanked people for support, asked for privacy, and asked for speculation to be tempered with compassion and humanity. The statement did not mention Nick. After the Wednesday hearing, Alan Jackson gave a brief statement outside court. He called the situation a devastating tragedy for the Reiner family. He said there are very complex and serious issues associated with the case that need to be carefully examined and analyzed. He urged restraint and asked that the process move forward as designed, without a rush to judgment. He emphasized the hearing was procedural and confirmed the next date, January 7th. One of the most detailed explanations offered publicly has come from the forensic angle, what multiple sharp force injuries can indicate about how a crime unfolded. Joseph Scott Morgan, a professor of applied forensics at Jacksonville State University and host of the podcast Body Bags, said sharp force injuries are among the most brutal forms of violence handled in medical legal investigations. He described them as up close and personal, requiring sustained effort and a willingness to remain in a victim's immediate space. He noted that when there are multiple knife injuries, investigators sometimes use the term overkill, and he said the description can fit situations where the number of wounds suggests a frenzied level of violence, cautioned, however, that he was not making a definitive determination from a distance. Morgan explained that sharp force trauma can involve different wound types. Incised wounds are generally longer and more shallow, created by slicing. Stab wounds are deeper relative to their length. He addressed public speculation about throats being cut by noting that such details were not included in the medical examiner's release, making them speculative, even if some scenarios could be medically plausible. He also described why the reported location of the victims matters. If the attack occurred in bed, Morgan said, the perpetrator would likely need intimate knowledge of the house and of the victim's routines. He raised questions. Were the victims usually asleep at those hours, or did they often wake during the night? And if an attacker is using a blade in that environment, he said, the physics of force and positioning can become crucial. In one scenario he described, an attacker may need to apply pressure and control to create certain kinds of injuries. Morgan said such a scene would likely be extremely bloody. The neck contains major blood vessels, and injury there can create arterial spray. Every time a blade penetrates tissue, vascular structures can be compromised, and bleeding continues while a victim is alive. Investigators then look for patterns, whether blood remained confined to one room, whether it was tracked into hallways, whether there were signs of movement through the home, and whether there was any attempt to clean up at the scene. He also pointed to a vague phrase in the medical examiner's listing, other contributing factors. Those factors were not specified publicly. Morgan raised possibilities without making conclusions, whether blunt force could have been involved, or whether an underlying medical condition might have contributed alongside the trauma. Toxicology results, he noted, typically take time and are not immediately available. Another unresolved question is timing. How closely investigators can determine when Rob and Michelle Reiner died. Morgan described the tools used to estimate the post-mortem interval, including rigor mortis, lividity, and body temperature. He said one early clue sometimes comes from emergency medical technicians noting rigidity, such as when an arm cannot be easily flexed. He explained that rigor can begin in smaller muscles, jaw and eyelids, before becoming more obvious in larger muscle groups like arms and legs. Temperature can be taken at a scene, and he described general training rules of thumb. A body can lose about 2 degrees in the first hour after death, then roughly 1 degree per hour up to around the 12th hour, after which it tends to approach ambient conditions. These guidelines provide ranges, not precision, and depend on variables that are not public here. From an evidence standpoint, Morgan said investigators typically look for trace blood on a suspect's body and clothing, even after an attempted cleanup. Blood can remain in less obvious areas, including near the hairline and on the back of the neck. In a double victim case, he said, blood can be commingled, creating forensic links through DNA. He highlighted the Santa Monica hotel room as a critical point in the narrative. If staff found a large amount of blood, investigators would want to know what was visible upon entry, whether there were signs of an attempted cleanup, and what might have been noticeable when the guest checked in at 4 a.m. Morgan questioned how someone could check in face-to-face at that hour after leaving a violent scene without drawing attention, unless clothing, such as an overcoat or layers, concealed visible stain. And there is the missing weapon question. If a knife was used, Morgan said it could have been discarded during movement across the city, potentially somewhere between Brentwood, Santa Monica, and the area near USC, where Nick Reiner was later seen. Or, if it came from inside the home, it could have been a weapon of opportunity, a knife readily available in most kitchens. Morgan added that many homicides originate within domestic space, not from strangers, and that edged weapons are common for a simple reason: most homes contain them. At the same time, he urged caution with rumor. He said police are working an active double homicide investigation and will not reveal everything publicly while building a case. He warned that in Hollywood, people talk quickly, and multiple versions of the same detail can circulate long before law enforcement provides a definitive account. Right now, the confirmed pillars of the case are these. The medical examiner has ruled the deaths homicides and described multiple sharp force injuries. Prosecutors have charged Nick Reiner with 2 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances. And the next court date is set for January 7, 2026. But some of the most important questions remain unanswered in official statements. The precise time of death, the full sequence inside the home, whether a weapon has been recovered, and what exactly the medical examiner meant by other contributing factors. Until those answers arrive in court filings and sworn testimony, this case will continue to unfold on 2 tracks: reported details forming a public narrative, and a legal process moving methodically toward January 7th. And at the center of it all is one question, still unresolved. What happened after that party ended, before the doors of that home were opened on Sunday afternoon?